Hey everyone, we are so glad that you can join us for the virtual Midrash. Welcome to the Way Wednesdays. I'm Doug and Bob is waiting in the wings. But before we get to tonight's study, I want to encourage you to get the Way Congregation app. And we have a big announcement, which is that it will now read the audio Bible, will read the Torah portion and plus some extra stuff, so you can get through the whole Bible in 1 year based on the Torah portion. Isn't that cool? I think it's pretty cool. I don't know. I think you're going to think it's cool too, because now, instead of, listening to the Bible is awesome, but if you can listen to the Torah portion, how much cooler is that, right? So make sure to check that out. It's right there. If you consider yourself, a member or, part of the Way congregation and part of this ministry that God is doing, and you want to support that, you can give right through the app. So check that out. It's pretty awesome as well. We have books on there. Ed Doss's book is on there. I'm going to be interviewing him tomorrow, so check that out. Instead of our normal prophecy roundtable, we'll be doing that instead. So I hope you can join us for that. And let's see, this coming Shabbat, we are having our regular service. So check that out. And one more thing, the first Friday of every month, we are having an Erev Shabbat, kind of a Friday night get together at the church. So there'll be some food, there'll be some fellowship, and we'll break the bread. So please come for that. It'll be really a wonderful time. And that is starting at 6 o'clock at the Lakewood location there in Colorado. All right, so please come and join us. All right, without any further ado, here is my good host, co-host, Bob. you're psyching me out with what you got written there, but I've known you as Bob forever. But yes, Robert Rico, and really, it's always a pleasure to do this with you. It looks like I should put us like this, because otherwise it looks like I'm way taller than you, because the way your camera is set up. But this is really going to be a wonderful passage. So let's get into it, and then we'll discuss it. All right, this is the genealogy of Isaac, Abram's son. Abram begat Isaac. When Isaac was 40 years old, he took Rebekah as wife, the daughter of Bethuel, the Syrian of Padan Aram, the sister of Laban the Syrian. Now Isaac pleaded with the Lord for his wife because she was barren, and the Lord granted his plea, and Rebekah his wife conceived. But the children struggled within her, and she said, "If all is well, why am I like this?" So she went to inquire of the Lord. And the Lord said to her, "Two nations are in your womb, two peoples shall be separated from your body. One people shall be stronger than the other, and the older shall serve the younger." So when her days were fulfilled for her to give birth, indeed there were twins in her womb. And the first came out red. He was like a hairy garment all over, so they called him Esav. Afterward, his brother came out, and his hand took hold of Esau's heel, so his name was called Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old when she bore them. And so the boys grew, and Esau, or Esav in Hebrew, was a skillful hunter, a man of the field, but Jacob was a mild man, dwelling in tents. And Isaac loved Esau because he ate of his game, but Rebekah loved Jacob. Now Jacob cooked a stew, and Esau came in from the field, and he was weary. And Esau said to Jacob, "Please feed me with that same red stew, for I am weary." Therefore, his name was called Edom, which means red. But Jacob said, "Sell me your birthright as of this day." And Esau said, "Look, I'm about to die. So what is this birthright to me?" Then Jacob said, "Swear to me as of this day." So he swore to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. And Jacob gave Esau bread and stew of lentils. Then he ate and drank, arose, and went his way. Then thus Esau despised his birthright. Oh man, that is that's crazy stuff. And it looks like I lost Bob. I hope he comes back. So please come back, Bob. We need you. This is all right. Well, let's jump back into the text, and hopefully Bob will rejoin us very soon. But let's go back and take a look here. All right, so what we're doing, first of all, this is, of course, the genealogy. This is telling you, right, this is the next story. And Isaac, right, we've only heard a little bit from Isaac. We know that he was born, right, he was weaned, or he was circumcised. And then Abraham sent out a search party to find him a wife. And successful. All right. This guy's 40 years old when he takes Rebecca as his wife. Not everybody got married at 20. I guess that's something to keep in mind. And notice here that his wife is barren. It sounds like, just like his mother was barren, so too his wife is barren. Now, I don't know medically why. I have no idea. I guess it doesn't really matter. But the Lord is going to be with him. And I think this is such a beautiful picture that he prayed for his wife, and the Lord granted his plea, and Rebecca, his wife, conceived. But right after that prayer, what's happening? You've got these two nations within her. They're struggling, all right? And the Lord says, two nations are within your womb. Two peoples shall be separated from your body. One shall be stronger than the other, and the older shall serve the younger. Now, that principle is something that we see again and again and again in Scripture. In fact, it really is at the heart of so much of what we see in Scripture. Going straight back to Satan. Satan was the greatest of all of God's creatures, the greatest, right? He had all the looks, he had the brains, and he was the standard of perfection. And the one thing he didn't want to do was to be a servant. But guess what? Jesus came, and he was the greatest because he is the greatest, because he's the creator of all things, king of heaven and earth, second to none except the Father. And guess what? He comes and lays down his life. He washes people's feet. He takes that ultimate place of submission as the great king, but he comes to serve others. And that is a principle that we see repeatedly in Scripture, that the greatest will serve the lesser. And it's one of those lessons that is really hard because we don't really want to die to ourselves. Dying to ourselves hurts, right? It means that I have to lay down my desires, my prerogatives, sometimes rightfully earned prerogatives, right? I worked hard for these things, and now you want me to give them up? What? I mean, come on. Now, in Satan's case, he worked for nothing, right? So everything he had was a gift from the Lord, and he had nothing to boast about, even though he was pretty full of himself. But sometimes in this world, we can work really hard and we can achieve things, and then God asks us, okay, I want you to, to give this thing up. And sometimes that's very difficult. However, when we take a step back and we say, okay, I get it, Lord. I mean, yeah, I did work hard for these things. But when I think about it, you gave me the place that I was born in the world. And, maybe I had a silver spoon or a semi-silver spoon in my mouth when I was born. I didn't deserve those things. I didn't deserve the good parents I had or the education that I had as compared to somebody else. And so when you really start to think about it, there really is nothing to boast about. And that is why humility, humbling ourselves, is so incredibly important. So that again is right here. And it looks like Bob is back. Awesome. Welcome back, Senor. You are still muted, so make sure to unmute yourself. Awesome. Yeah. Glad you're back. Just talking about the principle of being humble and how the first shall serve the last, etc. So what do you share with us your impressions of this passage here?
All of a sudden, I went dead on the nut. I was going in panic mode. One of the things that I talked to you earlier today about was where's Waldo? From the last week's Parsha to today, a number of years have passed, and it doesn't show where he went. I mean, several things happened that we don't know about. Where was Mr. Laughter for his mom's funeral? Where was he between some of these stories? And the next thing we know is here he is with Rebecca, and he is in the land, and most likely that he was no longer there at Beersheba. He had gone further south, and there's a number of reasons for that. We won't go into it, except I lost a little bit of time. But nonetheless, his wife's having difficulty having a child. He intercedes for her. She intercedes. She takes the initiative and starts asking God, what is it that's happening here? By the way, Rebecca means ensnarer, a person that ensnares you. So that's interesting because we'll see how this pans out later on in terms of her name. So when we look at what's happening between the two boys, yeah, truly there's going to be two nations inside of her. And we all pretty much know the story of what happens. We know that eventually, as they grow older, one is a field guy. He loves going out and hunting. He loves to go out into the field, and his dad loves him. You know, he's the sports guy. He's the guy that he's going to become the All-American. He's the guy that's going to go out there, and every fall he's going to go hunting, and his dad really enjoys that. He likes the meals that he has from his hunting that his wife prepares. And then we have his brother, who Yaakov, he's the man of the tent. And there's an idiom within Judaism that talks about the people of the tent. There's a lot written about people of the tent. The Mishkan is the tent in a future in which God's presence will reside. We see here that he's a man of the tent, and the idea is he wasn't necessarily the bookworm, but the tent. Whose tent is this? This tent is his grandmother's tent. And Sarah was where the future was going to be. It wasn't going to be with the firstborn. It was going to be with Sarah's child. And Isaac, Mr. Laughter, made everybody happy. But there's a lot of things that happen inside the tent. In a Bedouin society like this was, there's a lot of discussion. In fact, if you talk to troops that have gone to Afghanistan and have been out in the tribes, in the tribal areas, you'll find that there's a lot of discussion that's happening between men in the tent. All the news is discussed there. Your heritage, what the future looks like, all the politics of the area and your future is discussed in the tent. So he hears and he knows about the heritage of Abraham. They know that there's a promise given. There's a heritage involved. There's a future involved. And he's the man of that tent. He wants to be part of that future. His older brother, only moments older, is not concerned about that. He's not concerned about it, not one whit. He's concerned about the things that are exterior to the family. He's not interested necessarily in his heritage. And there we have a juxtaposition within the family, and we have a problem that's going to fester and fester over a period of time. So when you read through that chapter, we come to an incident in which one of them is cooking. Some of the ideas that the Jewish commentators have made about this meal and why this man came, his brother, it was a commemoration meal, a memory of their grandfather. Something was happening with our tempestuous little brother or older brother, who was very much in a hurry, and he was starving. He was unsuccessful in his hunt, probably. And he finally got home, and he was famished, and wasn't really interested in this particular time, or if they were commemorating Abraham, remembering their granddaddy. At any rate, it says a very interesting thing about the exchange. The exchange is, I'll give you a bowl of beans if you will give me your birthright. Now, what was the birthright about? I mean, there's two things happening in this story towards the end. But what is the birthright? That his older brother despised. That's a pretty strong word. He despised the birthright. He had no interest in it. None. And in the process, he says, just give me the beans, you can have the birthright. Now, is there a document involved here? Is there a ribbon? Is there a special ring that goes with that birthright? No. The birthright was to be the priest over the family. He was to be the priest. He was the oldest one. He was the one on whom he was to entreat God and intercede for his family. Mm-hmm. He was not interested.
You know, just to put that in modern vernacular, I'll edit myself, but it's basically saying I don't give a blankety blank about that effing blankety blank document or whatever birthright thing, right? I mean, that's what it means to despise that. Like, if we put that into modern talk, that's essentially what Esau is saying is, I don't give a blank, blank, blank. I don't give two blanks about that blank. I mean, that's what he's doing. And you're like, wait a second, this is a treasured, not document, but it's a treasured right that you have.
That's exactly right.
So right. You're counting it as worthless? Like, this is worth a lot. I mean, you just can't even put this into monetary amount, how much this is worth. And you're like, what do I care about that stupid thing?
It's invisible. It's not material. You're going to be the head of the family by praying over us, by interceding for us. You're going to be the spiritual head of the clan, or you're going to turn around and you're going to be a judge over my children. Is that what you're going to be doing? I don't care. That is nothing. Which tells us something about being inside the tent and listening, and not experiencing, because we're going to catch some of that downstream. But there was a heritage that was being laid down in which the younger brother is saying, this is very important. I've sat in the tent. I've asked questions. I wanted to know why. Why did God call Abraham my granddaddy? Why? What happened there? Well, what's so important about this promise that's given to us? And we're the ones that are to carry it. What about that? Someone else is guaranteeing this promise. Well, what's so important about that? I mean, this young man was exposed to those ideas. The other one, he might have just placated his father and come up with, oh yeah, well, this is really important, Dad. This is really what's really happening with our family. But he had one eye out the window, one out to let's get out of here as fast as possible. When Dad's finished talking, all right, I'm going to be able to go out with all the guys. I'm going to go out there and go hunting. And by the way, there's no such thing as a kosher kill here. We're not going to go on, and we're going to have an arrow, and I'm going to put it right through that beast, and I'm going to eat it. I mean, that's who he was. And that's a big difference between the two men. that are now, we're going to see an adventure that's going to unfold between us and befold us, in front of us.
Yeah, that's really awesome stuff. I just kind of bringing that out really, I think is so beneficial because, why did he name that price, right? If he could have named anything, I'll give you a bowl of stew if you give me 2 weeks, catch of game, right? I mean, or, if you give me all the gold you have right now or something like that, right? But Jacob knew exactly what he was asking for and why he was asking for it. And I think what you're saying about the 10, it just makes so much sense that, like he had really thought about this and he's like, wow, that's really valuable. And I want that because he was tuned in, not entirely to God. I mean, he's kind of like, God, if you do these things for me, then you could be my God. I mean, he's a little bit, arrogant about the whole thing, but he understands that there's value in that. And that's certainly step one to going in the right direction. Well, hey, let's get into 26 and we'll dig some more. So speaking of digging, there's a lot of digging in this chapter.
Yeah,
there was a famine in the land besides the first famine that was in the days of Abraham. And Isaac went to Abimelech, king of the Philistines in Gerar. Then the Lord appeared to him and said, do not go down to Egypt. Live in the land of which I shall tell you. Dwell in this land, and I will be with you and bless you. For to you and your descendants I give all these lands, and I will perform the oath which I swore to Abraham your father. I will make your descendants multiply as the stars of heaven. I will give to your descendants all these lands, and in your seed all the nations of the earth shall be blessed. Because, I love this verse, Abraham obeyed my voice, kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws. So Isaac dwelt in Gerar. And the men of the place asked about his wife, and he said, she is my sister. For he was afraid. One of these days we'll get Bob to turn off his microphone. All right. So he said, she is my sister, for he was afraid to say she is my wife, because he thought, lest the men of the place kill me for Rebekah, because she is beautiful to behold. Now it came to pass, when he had been there a long time, that Abimelech, king of the Philistines, looked through a window and saw there was Isaac showing endearment to Rebekah, his wife. Then Abimelech called Isaac and said, quite obviously she's your wife. So how could you say she's my sister? Isaac said to him, because I said, lest I die on account of her. And Abimelech said, what is this you have done to us? One of the people might soon have lain with your wife, and you would have brought guilt on us. So Abimelech charged all his people, saying, he who touches this man or his wife shall surely be put to death. Then Isaac sowed in that land and reaped in the same year 100-fold, and the Lord blessed him. The man began to prosper and continued prospering until he became very prosperous, for he had possessions of flocks and possessions of herds and a great number of servants. So the Philistines envied him. Now the Philistines had stopped up all the wells which his father's servants had dug in the days of Abraham his father, and they had filled them with earth. And Abimelech said to Isaac, go away from us, for you are much mightier than we. Then Isaac departed from there and pitched his tent in the valley of Gerar and dwelt there. And Isaac dug again the wells of water which they had dug in the days of Abraham his father, for the Philistines had stopped them up after the death of Abraham. He called them by the names which his father had called them. Also Isaac's servants dug in the valley and found a well of running water there. But the herdsmen of Gerar quarreled with Isaac's herdsmen, saying, the water is ours. So he called the name of the well Esek, because they quarreled with him. Then they dug another well, and they quarreled over that one also. So they called its name Sitnah. And he moved from there and dug another well, and they did not quarrel over it. So he called its name Rehovot, because he said, for now the Lord has made room for us, and we shall be fruitful in the land. Then he went up from there to Beersheba, and the Lord appeared to him the same night and said, I am the God of your father Abraham. Do not fear, for I am with you. I will bless you and multiply your descendants for my sake, for my servants Abraham's sake. So he built an altar there and called on the name of the Lord, and he pitched his tent there, and there Isaac's servants dug a well. Then Abimelech came to him from Gerar with Ahuzat, one of his friends, and Pichol, the commander of his army. Then Isaac said to them, why have you come to me, since you hate me and have sent me away from you? And they said, we have certainly seen that the Lord is with you. So we said, let there now be an oath between us, between you and us, and let us make a covenant with you, that you will do us no harm, since we have not touched you, and since we have done nothing to you but good, and have sent you away in peace. You are now the blessed of the Lord. So he made them a feast, and they ate and drank. Then they arose early in the morning and swore an oath with one another, and Isaac sent them away, and they departed from him in peace. It came to pass the same day that Isaac's servants came and told him about the well which they had dug, and he said to them, we have found water. So he called it Sheba. Therefore the name of the city is Beersheba to this day. When Esau was 40 years old, he took as wives Judith, the daughter of Beri the Hittite, and Basemat, the daughter of Elon the Hittite. And they were a grief of mind to Isaac and Rebekah. All right. Wow. Well, before we get really too far, I wanted to just take a second and talk about verse 5. I know there's lots to talk about in this, but verse 5, anybody that has ever had to deal with the question of why are you keeping the laws? The law was done away with. The law was given at Sinai, and it's the law of Moses. No, quite the contrary. What does God say to Isaac about Abraham? He says, Abraham obeyed my voice, kept my charge, my commandments, that's mitzvotai, my statutes, chukotai, ve torotai, and my laws, my Torahs, my instructions, right? So he makes it so clear that God's commandments, his Torah, is not something that he came up with at Sinai. These are God's values. And that verse is a powerful one because you see very, very clearly that a man some 500 years, roughly 600 years before the giving of the Torah at Sinai was already doing the things that God wanted him to do and the things that God says he's going to put in the new covenant. Right? So there's so much to that. All right. Well, that was my insight. Why don't you take it away, Bob? I know so many great things in here, and we can just kind of chat on them.
Well, some of the language in here, exactly in that verse, is pretty powerful. The word Shema in verse, he kept, he guarded those words that I gave him. Where did he get the words? They were getting them in the tent with instruction that was coming. One son just placates everybody. Oh yeah, that's important. And the other one takes them to heart. The other one is listening to what those words are. And what else is going on? And my charge, and the word in Hebrew gives you the idea that you are a guard who has a prisoner, and your responsibility is to make sure that the prisoner is a prisoner, that he does not escape. So you have to be diligent in your charge that you have. So the understanding is Abraham understood this. He understood how important it was that he was the friend of God, and that he would withhold nothing from him, nothing. And yet he then gave him the pearls of heaven and told him, you're going to be responsible for a people, a nation, the world. You're not going to guarantee this. I am. That's how important it is to me, your friend and your God. He takes that to heart, and he passes that on to his family. And as we move through these stories, we see how important or unimportant those words are. So that's what I have to comment on that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Keep going. I'm loving it.
Oh,
this is good.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's other elements that are really important that as we're going through the blessing that is given to Isaac, he is discussing the issue with Abimelech, and he's going to stay in the land. What's interesting is Gerar means like it's a resort. It's a place you don't stay at. You don't stay there. It's not going to be your retirement program.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lodge. That's literally what it means. It's a place of lodging. So
it's the same word as ger, for those that maybe know some Hebrew. Ger is a stranger, foreigner, sojourner. So it's the place of sojourning, essentially.
Yeah, it's a place where strangers gather, and they drink the water, they eat all they're going to eat. It's the little Las Vegas in town, and everybody comes from all over to this area of this man's this Abimelech's kingdom, who's a very powerful man. And he notices that these people aren't moving along. In fact, they're moving along. They're actually going to plant themselves here. I'm really wondering if Isaac understood the promise, and I think maybe he did. We see some evidence of it. What was the promise that God gives to his grandfather? Everywhere your soul touches, I'm going to give you that land. So they're moving along the land, but he's there and he's going to establish himself. He's going to establish his family there. He's going to do all he can to do it. And what happens is the rest is history. When we see about his wife and what effect it has in the king's face. And finally, the king is so upset about what happens. He says, this man's going to has a special place. Of all the different strangers that we have in this area, this guy's going to have a special place. He gets King's X. Nobody touches him. Nobody messes with his family. Nothing. Just leave him alone. Well, in being left alone, God gives him 100-fold. And Abimelech takes notice of that for sure. And he's getting wealthier and wealthier and wealthier. And Abimelech is going, I don't know about this. If this guy starts cashing in on this, I remember the stories that his grandfather had an army. I wonder if this guy has an eye for my kingdom. That could have been one of the ideas that was in the back of his head. Well, I think it was. Look at verse 16. And Abimelech said to Isaac, go from us, for you are much mightier than we. That has an echo downstream. And where's that echo? Where does it land? Hundreds of years later, in a place called Egypt. And when we turn to Exodus 1:10, that's the argument that is used by Pharaoh and his advisors. They're saying these people, if something happens, they're going to join them or someone else that invades the land. And these people are from the other side. You never know. They may have allegiances, and if something happens here, they're going to overthrow our kingdom. Same argument. What was that about? It was about the blessing that God had given these people. And the blessing that God gives us, we have to start looking at things seriously around what happens to us. Who was the originator of all this hatred? Who's the originator of this envy? Who's the originator? It's the enemy himself. And Hasatan wants to destroy the promises that God gives us. Any success that we have may be misunderstood. Earlier, when I cut a corner of what you had said when the machine went down, the realities of meekness. When God gives us blessing upon blessing, and we are becoming a simply the currency for God to use us. We see this as an example in Peter and John going to the temple to pray. They find that they don't have any money to give to the poor, which was a requirement of righteousness at the time. And in their neediness, they're able to become God's handiwork, because on one hand, God gives them the ability, and on the other hand, they say, look at us, to the man that was born lame. And for 40 years, he laid there. And now he has the ability to transfer that blessing from God through themselves to another person. And that's the blessing. We get the word currency, money. Money is only a symbol of something of value, unless it's gold or silver. And if it's real, then in and of itself, it has intrinsic value, but it still doesn't do what it needs to do. It will not heal a person, for example. It's only a symbol of wealth. It's only a symbol. So all the symbols that God gives us to use, we are to be those transforming agents to change the world around us. He's looking for radical people that will be able to receive the blessing that God has intended for us, not to hold on to it, but to pass it on, and thereby demonstrating what the kingdom of God looks like. And later on, hundreds of years later, the Messiah will come, and he'll come heralding the kingdom of God. He'll be talking about what is the currency of that kingdom. How does it work? What are the values of the Torah that are expressed through humanity as we share God's love, God's compassion, God's goodness through us to the rest of the world? And so here we see a little picture of that little drop of blessing that begins in the beginning of the book of beginnings, of that theme that's going to expand throughout the Bible, throughout the scriptures. We're going to see things like a judgment of God because people forgot, because they wanted to do what Esau did. They were more interested in playing. He went out and gets married with the world. He gets married to the children of Het. And last week we discussed who the children of Het were. Mm-hmm. They were the terrorists, right? That's what they're known for. They weren't up people.
That's right. Yeah.
And so here we see this situation.
Yeah. I also want to talk about how, we see Isaac doing the same thing that his father did, right? And that he goes and he says, this is my sister, right? Where did he get that trick? Well, from dad, obviously. I'm sure he heard all the stories. When your father and I went down to Egypt, can you believe what he said about me? He said that I'm his sister, and then he did it again. And he said, I'm his sister, right? So he's like, that one I better think about. And, when it talks about in Exodus, God says that he's, a very gracious God and all this in Exodus 34. He says that he will remember the sins onto the third and fourth generations, visiting the sins under the third and fourth generation. And sometimes it just sounds like, well, he's just a real meanie and he's going to make everybody pay. But I think that's really a misunderstanding.
That's
really
right.
What he's getting at is that the sins of this generation linger into the next one. Sometimes they're passed on epigenetically, but sometimes they're just passed on because that's what you learned in the house, right?
The behavior, yeah.
It's the nurture and nature kind of thing, right? So what you're nurtured with often becomes your very own thing. And, this is where people wake up in their midlife crisis. They're like, oh my goodness, I'm just like my dad, oh no, I'm just like my mother. I didn't want to be, but, and yet that's, so often what happens is that you become kind of that carbon copy to a lesser extent of your parents. And this is why it is important for each one of us to walk according to God's ways, so that the next generation will not have to repeat the same mistakes that we made. Now, we're not going to get it all perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but the goal is to walk in obedience. But we also see grace, once again, when we talk about the fathers of the faith, we talk about Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, right? Wow, those are such amazing guys. And yet, look how many times they utterly tripped up and just like, what are you guys thinking? I mean, it's like a duh kind of thing. And yet, that's one of the things I love about the Bible is that it really gives us the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? It puts out all the dirty laundry as to what actually happened. So the Bible is not trying to sanitize the message. It's just giving us the message. And then in the context of that message, the good stuff, the bad stuff, we see God working with frail human beings. Isn't that good news? I think that's really, really good news, is that God will work with these frail human beings to still bring about his will in the end here. And so, I don't know, I got kind of jazzed about that. And then, there's just so much more in this text here that, this is my wife, right? And of course, we already talked about a lot of what this stuff is happening, what's going on here. But we have the word esek, which of course means to quarrel. And then they just keep having these different names, sitna. And then finally, now there's space for us, right? The Lord has made space for us. But it's so interesting that, the person who starts off being your enemy, when he sees your righteous conduct and he realizes, wait a second, God was with that guy. Maybe I shouldn't have thrown him out quite so soon because, he's doing pretty well. So yeah, they make this covenant, of course. I don't know if it's just business or, he throws them a feast, they ate and they drank, right? So it sounds like, it wasn't all bad. They ended, everything ended well. But, again, when we're faithful, then that's really cool. And then the last thing I just wanted to point out, sometimes, Bob, I think we both have heard many times that, Abraham was Jewish. Not true. Okay.
That's
Abraham
right.
was not Jewish. And I tell you, I understand people that say it. They're, in a sense, what they're saying is that, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob were believing in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, who's Jewish. And I'm like, yeah, I know what you're saying, but it's really inaccurate and it causes trouble downstream. And what happens is when you start saying that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob were Jewish, then later when we come to the United Kingdom of Israel, splitting into two, and then we have the house of Judah and the house of Israel. And sometimes we have quite often we have different directions that they're going to go, only to be brought back together. If we just say that they're all Jews, then there's no theological space left to put them back together. And I feel like we kind of paint ourselves into a corner. So notice right here, who did Esau marry? He says when he was 40 years old, he took as wives Judith, right? I mean, that word right there in the Hebrew is Yehudit, okay, right here. So Yehudah is a man, Yehudit is a woman, right? So this is well before Judah even comes along. You have this woman named Yehudit, and it means praise. But this is, of course, the woman's name for praise. And so it just goes to prove, once again, just as from a little linguistic thing, that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob were not Jewish. They were Hebrews, yes. They clearly believed in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, right? The El Shaddai, Yehovah. They believed in that God. But they were not Jewish. So I just, I never want to make a huge issue of it, but I think it's important that we understand what's going on in the text. All right. Well, what do you say? Why don't we get to our next chapter and we'll get some more exciting stuff going. All right. Now it came to pass when Isaac was old and his eyes were so dim that he could not see, that he called Esau, his older brother, and said to him, "My son." And he answered him, "Here I am." Then he said, "Behold," hold on. All right. "Behold, I am old. I do not know the day of my death. Now, therefore, please take your weapons, your quiver and your bow, and go out to the field and hunt game for me. And make me savory food, as such I love, and bring it to me that I may eat, and that my soul may bless you before I die. Now Rebekah was listening when Isaac spoke to Esau his son, and Esau went to the field to hunt game and to bring it. So Rebekah spoke to Jacob her son, saying, Indeed, I heard your father speak to Esau your brother, saying, Bring me game and make savory food for me, that I may eat it and bless you in the presence of the Lord before my death. Now therefore, my son, obey my voice according to what I command you. Go now to the flock and bring me from there 2 choice kids of the goats, and I will make savory food from them for your father, such as he loves. Then you shall take it to your father, that he may eat it, and that he may bless you before his death. And Jacob said to Rebekah his mother, Look, Esau my brother is a hairy man, and I am a smooth-skinned man. Perhaps my father will feel me, and I shall seem to be a deceiver to him, and I shall bring a curse on myself and not a blessing. But his mother said to him, Let your curse be on me, my son. Only obey my voice, and go get them for me. And he went and got them and brought them to his mother, and his mother made savory food, such as his father loved. Then Rebekah took the choice clothes of her elder son Esau, which were with her in the house, and put them on Jacob her younger son. And she put the skins of the kids of the goats on his hands, and on the smooth part of his neck. Then she gave the savory food and the bread, which she had prepared, into the hand of her son Jacob. So he went to his father and said, Well, my father. And he said, Here I am. Who are you, my son? Jacob said to his father, I am Esau, your firstborn. I have done just as you told me. Please arise, sit and eat of my game, that your soul may bless me. But Isaac said to his son, How is it that you have found it so quickly, my son? And he said, Because the Lord your God brought it to me. Then Isaac said to Jacob, Please come near, that I may feel you, my son, whether you are really my son Esau or not. So Jacob went near to Isaac his father, and he felt him and said, The voice is Jacob's voice, but the hands are the hands of Esau. And he did not recognize him, because his hands were hairy like his brother Esau's hands. So he blessed him. Then he said, Are you really my son Esau? He said, I am. He said, Bring it to me, and I will eat of my son's game, so that my soul may bless you. So he brought it near to him, and he ate, and brought him wine, and he drank. Then his father Isaac said to him, Come near now and kiss me, my son. And he came near and kissed him, and he smelled the smell of his clothing, and blessed him, and said, Surely the smell of my son is like the smell of a field, which the Lord has blessed. Therefore may God give you of the dew of heaven, of the fatness of the earth, and plenty of grain and wine. Let people serve you, and nations bow down to you. Be master over your brethren, and let your mother's sons bow down to you. Cursed be everyone who curses you, and blessed be those who blessed you. Now it happened as soon as Isaac had finished blessing Jacob, and Jacob had scarcely gone out from the presence of Isaac his father, that Esau his brother came in from his hunting. He also made savory food and brought it to his father, and said to his father, Let my father rise and eat of his son's game, that your soul may bless me. Then his father Isaac said to him, Who are you? So he said, I am your son, your firstborn Esau. Then Isaac trembled exceedingly and said, Who? Where is the one who hunted game and brought it to me? I ate all of it before you came, and I have blessed him, and indeed he shall be blessed. When Esau heard the words of his father, he cried with an exceedingly great and bitter cry, and said to his father, Bless me also, O my father. But he said, Your brother came with deceit and has taken away your blessing. And Esau said, Is he not rightly named Jacob? For he has supplanted me these 2 times. He took away my birthright, and look, he has taken away my blessing. And he said, Have you not reserved a blessing for me? Then Isaac answered and said to Esau, Indeed, I have made him your master, and all his brethren I have given to him as servants. With grain and wine I have sustained him. What shall I do now for you, my son? And Esau said to his father, Have you only one blessing, my father? Bless me also, O my father. And Esau lifted up his voice and wept. And Isaac his father answered and said to him, Behold, your dwelling shall be of the fatness of the earth, and of the dew of heaven from above. By your sword you shall live, and you shall serve your brother. And it shall come to pass, when you become restless, that you shall break his yoke from your neck. So Esau hated Jacob because of the blessing with which his father blessed him. And Esau said in his heart, The days of mourning for my father are at hand, and I will kill my brother Jacob. And the words of Esau, her older son, were told to Rebekah. So she sent and called Jacob, her younger son, and said to him, Surely your brother Esau comforts himself concerning you by intending to kill you. Now therefore, my son, obey my voice, arise and flee to my brother Laban in Haran, and stay with him a few days until your brother's fury turns away, until your brother's anger turns away from you and he forgets what you have done to him. Then I will send and bring you from there, Why should I be bereaved also of you both in one day? And Rebekah said to Isaac, I am weary of my life because of the daughters of Het. If Jacob takes a wife of the daughters of Het, like these who are the daughters of the land, what good will my life be to me? Wow. You know, this really raises an interesting question. Certainly, Esau despised the birthright. He didn't care about it at all. But it really seems like Rebekah has taken matters into her own hands. She knows that he despised it. He didn't care for it. And so she's going to make sure that her son Jacob gets it. I just feel like this may be one of those times where maybe we should wait upon the Lord. Maybe she should have waited upon the Lord. I'm absolutely certain, if God had already made the prophecy that the older would serve the younger, God can handle that. I feel like, she was out of line, and she took matters in her own hands, and then it cost her the relationship with her son. She never sees him again, right? By the time he comes back, she's dead. Esau is no longer angry by that time, but it really broke up the family. And I don't know. I think she could have done better. That's my opinion.
Well, that anger is still with us today.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's it's not just 4 generations. It's gone on and on and on and on. And the sad thing about all this, the tragedies that happen when we don't trust God. She didn't trust the promise, because she hears that something's going to happen and she still won't trust the promise. She doesn't trust Esau. She already knows who he is. He has 2 wives. He got them both at the same time. They're pagan women. They operate, and they are they're from the hate group. They are ruthless people, and they're not us. They're not our family, and we can't. I can't stand. I know my husband's going to die. I know it's almost on his deathbed, and can I trust this man to be a kind, generous, benevolent son when he's already has a bad reputation? I can't trust that. I've got to take it into my own hands. In fact, she takes it into her own name, right? Because she's the one that is herself a usurper. She is an ensnarer. So she weaves a conspiracy to go against her very husband. And it's really amazing. It's one of the only places in early literature like we have where the scripture talks about someone loving another. When she came from Mesopotamia and she sees this man who was 40 years old, she falls in love with him. He loves her. You notice that there isn't any other servants. There aren't any other concubines. There aren't other wives. This man was head over heels in love with her. And he took her to the place of safety where he learned all the stories about the family, to the tent of Sarah. That's why the tent idea is so important. And there he found her to be a loving, wonderful person. Now, this woman can't trust her children. Not this one. What's going to happen to me? God was going to work out that promise that he had given. It wasn't up to her to work it out. It's the same thing that was done to her. She did the same, in principle, the same thing. She, like her husband, lied to the king and said who she was. She, in principle, deceives also.
Wow, that's a great point.
And deceives her own husband, right?
Mm-hmm.
Deceives her own husband on his, not quite his deathbed, but towards the end of his days. And then she has, when the righteous son says, I can't do this. I can't do this. What does she say? You know, I can't do this. It's a cursed thing to do.
Mm-hmm. I'll take the curse on me.
I'll take the curse. I'll take the curse. And how many years was it that she still lived and lived and lived with Esau?
Mm-hmm.
In the greatest horror story that she could have imagined, the son that she loved, and where it is there, love. She loved him. And she raised him, and he was very special to her. She curses herself. She never sees him again, ever. And she lives with a horror story that she imagined in her mind. I mean, you start looking at the stories years and years and years ago, like Dallas or whatever those things were on TV 30, 40, 50 years ago. Right. All this intrigue of the family doing this and that. I mean, this is exactly where this material comes from, And so all the intrigue that is going on. I mean, that has a little servant that goes on listening. Oh, I heard this. Quickly, she runs over and tells her matron, this is what's going on. There's going to be conspiracy. This is what's happening. Oh, I can't let that happen. And then what happens to the other son? The other son, Esau, who was so damaged. Oh, he's so damaged. He's such a great guy. And now he did this twice to me. Twice. What do you mean twice? What do you mean twice, son? What do you mean twice?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
you know what's interesting is that when we kind of compare this to the New Testament life of Jesus, same thing happened, right? You had Peter. Right, Jesus says, I'm going to go be crucified. And he's like, no way, Lord. And he says, get behind me, Satan. And then another guy tried it, whose name was Judas. He didn't like Jesus' plan either. And so he betrays the Lord. And those are just two examples, right, of where when we get in the way of the Lord, we start trying to do his work, not our work, but his work. We mess it all up, right? I mean, in really huge ways. We mess it all up. I mean, I've heard this taught. Some people have said, well, she was justified in doing what she had to do. And I'm like, no, right? The principles, God's principles do not change, period, right? And he's never into cheating and lying and stealing and conniving. That's just not who he is. What happens is we see it reported in the Bible, but it's not rubber stamped like, oh, this is good. There's not a blessing on that. We see the curse, and I think what you're talking about, how this has gone down through the generations, and now it goes out to whole people groups, nations, where we're still upset about these things because, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years ago, these things happened and we're still upset about it, but we can't remember why. We don't remember why we hate those people, but we just know we do because, and these things fester, unfortunately. And, the better thing to do would be say, you know what? God said that the older is going to serve the younger. I don't know how he's going to do that. I'm not going to take things into my hands. I'm not going to deceive my husband. I'm not going to take a curse upon myself. I would never think of having my son go lie to my husband to try to usurp something, right? Now, it kind of worked because he did get the birthright, but look at the cost that he had to pay. And then, of course, what's going to happen to Jacob, the deceiver, right? He's going to go and be deceived by Laban. Here's a principle in Scripture. What you sow,
you shall reap.
You will reap. Okay.
What goes around comes around.
That's right. You can call that karma. I don't care what you want to call that, but that is foundational in Scripture. What you sow, you will reap. Right? I mean, Paul says it so clearly, hey, God is not mocked. What a man sows, that he shall also reap. And we see that principle throughout the pages of Scripture. So there's no getting around it. And I'll tell you, what irks me is when I hear Christians say, oh, well, all that was done away with at the cross. Nonsense. Come on, that's ridiculous. It's not done away with. That's why Paul says it well after the cross. What a man sows, that he shall also reap. And you will not get away from that principle. And so what Jacob here sows of deceiving his father, stealing from his brother in a way that he should not have done, is he then pays for it with getting the wrong wife, and then then he has two wives. Then he's got all this family intrigue that's going on. Oh my goodness. And you're like, well, how could you have had 12 patriarchs without all those wives? You know what? I look at the Duggar family, right? They have 19 kids, and that's just one woman. Who knows? Maybe God could have done it. I don't know. God's amazing, right? He could have had one woman have 12 sons, or however he wants to do it. He could have worked that out. But instead, taking matters into your own hands always leads to pain and sorrow, sadly. And Angela has a question. She says, didn't Esau already give his birthright away for food? And Bob, maybe you can touch on that, because you talked about that a little bit earlier regarding, what was going on with the whole thing with the birthright.
Well, it was in some of the Midrash of the sages. You'll read it's something that's very important to really understand, that it's still a principle that's a thin little thread that is woven through this entire story of this evening, and that is that of a meal and a promise, a meal and a covenant, a meal and a passing of authority. There's always a meal associated with it. In fact, we call that in the church in remembrance of me, right? When we go back, they surmised, the ancient sages, they surmised that this meal, and that's the reason he came in running, that I make it in time, and oh yeah, this is it. This is where we're having the get together. We're having this bowl of lentil soup. That particular type of lentil soup is used in commemoration of someone who has passed. Well, who had passed? Grandpa. Grandpa had passed. Now, we don't know what day or hour that he had passed, but we know he had passed. And this meal commemorated that. So they say. And it's important for the family. It's important between these two brothers, except Esau. The other brother says, no, it's not important to me. This is all story. This is all stuff. Just give me the soup. And it's one of the only places, and in fact, it's the only place in the Hebrew text where it says that I have my note here, and I'll tell you in a second.
That's so interesting.
That he ate right there, verse 34 of Genesis 25:34, and it's 1, 2, 3. You can see it there in Hebrew. It says he ate, drank, rose up, went straight out, and he despised his birthright. He hated it. But I mean, when you're seeing there in the text, right? There's one behind the other. Boom, 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 boom. I can hardly wait to get out of here. Yeah, you can have it. Just give me the meal. I'm out of here. I mean, think about that within the context of a family situation. Yeah, he had given it away. It was oral tradition, is that what you say with these lips goes on forever. It just passes into the wind. It is ruach. It is the wind. It is something eternal. So whatever you write down, that's why they say it. If the person behind it that writes it is no good, then the paper just tear it up. It's no good. The contract's no good, because it's all based on what that person has said and what that person is. Okay, so yeah, he didn't value it at all. He just wanted to do what he wanted to do, and so now he says it's so important that to his father, who's on his deathbed, as it were, and he tells him, now he swindled me twice. But here's the irony of these intrigues in family businesses and inside families. Who ended up with everything anyway? Esau. That's who ended up with everything. What about the good guy? The super nice kid. The kid that knew everything and what to do. We'll see in the future, like the next Parsha.
That's great.
He'll say something like, when he's rolling around with the angel, right? Or he's at Bethel, right? He said, well, and then he's arrogant. Well, the God of my father, not my God, not me, not my relationship with this God.
That's right.
But I'll serve him if he gives me $1 zillion. I'll serve him if. And he lays out all these requirements. I mean, imagine to the angel of the Lord, you're saying, I'll serve you on these conditions. I mean, it
wouldn't be the first time, right? It's not the last time.
No, not the. Yeah, here, this is a definition of chutzpah.
Yeah,
and we'll see that next week. I mean, what's going to happen? But I mean, we look at these characters, and this is the thing it teaches me. Rolled up into a big ball. That's me.
Yeah,
that's me. And God says, you know something? If I can put up with all the crap that I put up with these people and gave them a promise that's eternal, that you're the beneficiary of, can you trust me? Can you trust me?
Such a good point. That when he ran away, what did he have? Nothing. The clothes on his back was all he had. He was going to be the one that was going to inherit all, supposedly. He made these conniving all these things, and yet he ends up with nothing. And then he gets swindled by his uncle, who's
going to teach him how to swindle.
You think you're good at swindling? Well, welcome to my place. Okay.
Yeah, I taught my sister how to do this. Her name was what is it? Yeah. She's a little swindler. Yeah.
You're going to have to run away to get away out of my trap. And then you're going to go home with fear and trepidation, hoping you're not going to die. And again, the bottom line, don't try to do God's job for him. Stand upon the promises of God. Right. I know it's easy to say because I've been there and done it, or not done it, I should say. But the easy thing to do, if we would only do it, is to stand upon the promises of God, and then we don't have to go through all of those years of what does Jacob say? In the heat of the day and the cold of the night, I was freezing and I was doing all this stuff, and you changed my wages, all these times. You could have listened to God. Okay, you could have avoided all of that. And that's what the beautiful thing about the Bible is. It did not have to turn out the way that it turned out, but because of free will, God's like, you got a whole choice in this. You get to be front and center in this theater, and your choices are what I'm going to use. I will still accomplish my end result, regardless of what choices you make. I'm going to get you there. I'm going to get us there one way or the other. But you get to decide, is this the path, or this the path, or this the path, or this the path? But we'll still get over here. Guarantee it. And, when I think about like David and Bathsheba, that whole episode didn't have to happen, right? But it happened. And then God wove it in. And he weaves in Solomon and all that stuff that just didn't have to happen, but it did. So take courage, people. God will use your messed up story as well. He'll use my messed up story as well, and he will bring about just an incredible time. So, Bob, I just want to say thanks for yet another exciting parasha, another exciting midrash in the scriptures. It's always fun. So we look forward to it next week, everybody. Hope you can join us. Again, get the app because it has the audio Bible Torah cycle. It will read it to you. So that's really cool. Again, you can just be listening while you're doing the dishes or whatever you need to do, hands free. You can be listening to the Torah portion throughout the week. and just really get that into your head. So till next time, God bless you guys.